What would it take to arouse your life, to experience more connection, more pleasure, more realness, in and outside of the bedroom? I'm August McLaughlin, and this is Girl Boner Radio. Do you stay friends with your exes? Would you take a psychic's words to heart before officially calling it quits? Have you ever had a breakup totally change the way you approach relationships moving forward? All of these topics come up in the stories you'll hear today from two sex writers and experts with very different and wild breakup experiences. First, Suzannah Weiss. She's a feminist writer and sexologist. One of her zaniest breakups came at the end of a 3-year relationship. It involved a psychic reading and an almost life-changing event. We'll call the guy Lucas.
He lived in Germany. We actually met at a nightclub in Ibiza, and we fell in love there. I was actually living in New York, and I kind of moved to Germany, but was also kind of nomadic.
Their lives were different in other ways, too. So were their personalities.
He was a software engineer, worked in tech, a very nice boyfriend, also very in the box, whereas I'm very outside the box. I was a bit wilder than him, wanted other partners, wanted to explore non-monogamy, was always traveling, was really into psychedelics and things. He was more just like a very straightforward, nice guy, would take me to dinner and do nice things for me.
Increasingly, Suzannah realized they just really weren't compatible. Plus, there was some infidelity going on. It was all kind of wrapped up in their differences.
I think I have enough distance from the relationship to publicly say that I was a serial cheater in that relationship. And I had a big psychedelic experience where I realized that was not what I wanted ultimately. I ultimately wanted a partner I could share everything with, and I did not like having secrets from him. So I told myself, you know what, if anything else comes up, any opportunity that would be outside a monogamous agreement, I'm going to talk to him. I like to say the relationship ended over a 90-minute orgasm.
Here's how that played out.
This sex educator named Kenneth Play offered to give me a session. So he does hands-on body work. He said he can give women 90-minute orgasms with his hands and toys. And he wanted me to experience this and write about it. So I was like, okay, now I need to actually tell Lucas that I want to do this. And I told him, and he flipped out and said, that is so insulting to me. You think I couldn't do that? You're going to write about it and make me look like a fucking idiot. And I was like, wow, that's a side of you I have not seen. I don't think we can stay together because I want to be open to these experiences.
But Suzannah was overseas at the time, which is where the psychic reading happened.
So this was when we had decided to break up, but I was about to go to Germany to break up in person and get all of the stuff because I basically lived there. I was at the time actually in a psychic class where I was learning to give psychic readings. And the teacher said, you have to check out this medium Fleur. She's amazing. And so I had a call with her and it was freakishly accurate. She said I had been dealing with a chronic illness, which is true. And she even named the illness Lyme disease. I told her nothing. And then she said, I feel like you are in the process of ending a relationship, but you're about to actually travel somewhere to end it in person and get your things. And I said, that is exactly right. And then she said, so I see this relationship involving an unplanned pregnancy. Do you agree with what I'm saying? I said, no. She said, I see there's a baby really wanting to come in right around your 29th birthday. I, at the time, was a few months away from my 29th birthday. So I was like, oh shit, I gotta be careful. At the time, I was undecided about kids in general, but I definitely didn't want a kid with someone I was about to break up with in another country.
So she texted Lucas.
Just saying, you know what, it's best if when we see each other, not to have sex, because then we're going to want to get back together. He didn't believe in psychics, so I didn't even want to go there. I just said, let's just make sure we don't want to get back together.
Those orgasmic bonding hormones can be intense after all. So Suzannah and Lucas made other plans.
We were going to spend one day together, and then I was actually going to the Netherlands for something else. So I arrived in Germany, and it was awkward because we're like, we're breaking up. What do we do? But we just acted like a couple. We kissed when I got there. And then once we got back to his apartment, it was so soon before I was like, you know what? Let's have sex. Like it was just only natural. We hadn't seen each other in a while. So I immediately took back that rule and I figured, why not? I have one more day with him. This will be the last day I ever spend with him, probably. So why not make it a fun day?
Plus, they had condoms.
So, it was actually really hot, really great sex. I think I was just so horny. Planes make me horny for some reason. I was like right around my period, which also makes me horny. And he was like really playing with my breasts, which I love. And then he started rubbing my clit. And then I came really quickly. And then I was like, okay, so are we going to fuck? Like I really wanted to. And I was like a little bit nervous, but I was like, no, don't listen to the psychic. That's just a silly thing. And then he put the condom on and his penis starts bleeding. And I'm like, what is happening?
Lucas goes, oh, I cut myself shaving this morning.
And I'm like, okay, do you still want to do it? And he's like, maybe not right now. And I can't help but think that could have been a divine intervention.
Oh my gosh. Did you tell him?
So I didn't tell him at that point. At that point, we just cuddled, we were cool, and then we went out to dinner. And then on the way home, I was feeling a little more open. So I just blurted out, a psychic said that if we have sex, I'll get pregnant. He laughed and he was like, oh, come on. I told him all the things the psychic said. I was like, she said she knew I had Lyme disease. She knew I was in the process of ending a relationship and about to travel somewhere to end it fully. And he was like, well, she must have just like looked you up online. I'm like, I did not say anything online about this breakup. He's like, she must have hacked into your emails. I'm like, we didn't even email about it. So then we get back home and of course we want to have sex again. And then we were really careful. I was like, all right, just to be safe, how about you use a condom and you pull out? And it was fine. And I did not get pregnant. That's what I do normally now, like use a condom and pull out. I'm like, why not be that careful all the time?
Was that something that you learned from this? Would you say that was your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway is that psychics are real, but maybe not everything they say has to happen in the future. Maybe we have some control over that, and maybe there are divine interventions that will prevent that. But I do think that's another thing I learned is, if you really don't want to get pregnant, state what you want. You can take multiple measures not to.
Happy Masturbation May. The holiday-turned-month aims to celebrate and destigmatize sexual self-pleasure. As the Pleasure Chest shared on their blog, masturbation can be a natural, safe way to explore your body, feel pleasure, release built-up sexual tension, relieve stress, ease menstrual cramps, and protect against prostate cancer. To get busy with yourself in a fun, new way, check out the wide range of masturbation sleeves, vibrators, dildos, and more at thepleasurechest.com. And don't forget to pick up some lubricant. Shop your heart and your boner out with always discreet free shipping at thepleasurechest.com today. One more thing, because today is a little bit sad for me because the Pleasure Chest is transitioning to new ownership and they won't be running ads after this. I did not plan for this breakup episode to be my kind of breakup episode with the Pleasure Chest, but since it is, I want to say that this is one of the kindest breakups, the most bittersweet I've had because it's been so civil. There's so much gratitude on both sides, and unlike pretty much all of my exes, we will stay 100% friends. I'm so, so grateful for the support that they have given me and this show and my mission to bring pleasure, education, and true stories to you all over the years. And I hope you will continue to support them because I am genuinely such a huge fan. They offer such amazing, inclusive sex positivity. And I hope you will head to their stores, continue to support their website. And if you do stop by or send them a note, feel free to let them know that you're part of the Girl Boner posse. So this isn't a goodbye, just a new chapter for everyone. Again, their website to bookmark and keep visiting is thepleasurechest.com. Now, Zachary Zane's breakup story. Actually, it's 2 stories and where they led him. Zachary is a sex and relationship columnist and Grindr's sex expert, and his breakups have taught him a lot.
Yeah, I think you learn often breakups do not go as planned.
And that was just one lesson. So one of the breakups, actually a pair of them, happened a few years ago. The wilder one involved the woman that we'll call Jasmine that he had been dating, and the context around this is important.
So we were ethically non-monogamous. Actually, we were polyamorous. And at the time, I had like a boyfriend who was more of a primary partner. And we've been dating for almost 2 years. And when I started dating this woman, I made it clear in the beginning, hey, I'm not looking for another primary partner. I've done that. I've had 2 primary partners and it was just too much work. Just like navigating like the holidays. When I had both a boyfriend and a girlfriend, I remember this was years ago, like a month before like Thanksgiving and Christmas, I told them like, hey, I'm doing Thanksgiving with you, Christmas with you, New Year's with you. And I agreed to those plans. And during that week between Christmas and New Year's, my girlfriend was like, ugh, I just feel like you're spending more time with him. And he was like, ugh, I feel like you're spending more time with her. And I kind of wanted to be like, fuck both of you. But like, you know what? Like, yes, your feelings are valid. And thank you for sharing. But like, I planned this a month in advance. I'm not going home to see my family. I would like a little bit of credit. And so I was just like, this is just too much navigating. So since then, I've been more like hierarchical in my polyamory. So I made it very clear to this woman. I'm like, hey, I'm not looking for another primary girlfriend. But in hindsight, I kind of messed up, even though I would kind of state this repeatedly.
Whenever he thought she was falling for him hard.
Which also puts me in an uncomfortable position. I don't want to have to keep on being like, are you falling in love? If you are, maybe we should break this off. But I see how I was misleading in that I would be kind of cutesy with her, where it's like, oh, I take her out for a nice dinner on her birthday. You know, we do picnics, we do things like that. And I like doing those things. That doesn't mean I want to marry you. That doesn't mean I want you as my primary partner. You know, we weren't using condoms too, and I was coming inside of her. And I feel like that's also like step in the relationship. So even though I said repeatedly, hey, I don't see this escalating, I think because of my actions, she was like, well, he's being cutesy. He actually wants this. And it's hard for me because I'm like, yeah, I want to hold your hand when we're hanging out together. That doesn't mean I want to marry you.
Things took a turn after Zachary and his primary partner broke up.
So I had just broken up with my boyfriend of almost 2 years, and I was heartbroken. You know, we had broken up, and it was very sad, and I was still kind of reeling in the aftermath of it. I really cared for this person, and I told her just to let her know. Obviously, this is a big change in my life. And when I said this, like a big smile came across her face.
And that felt not great to Zachary.
I'm sad. I'm heartbroken. And I was like, oh, shit. I know what you're thinking because of this. And so I clarified. I was like, hey, just because I'm broken up with him doesn't mean I want you to be a primary partner. Doesn't mean I want you to be my girlfriend. Doesn't mean we are escalating because this has de-escalated.
That was not what she wanted to hear.
I just saw her face drop, you know, the smile to the sadness. And she goes, well, I'm glad you told me this because I was working up the courage to share something with you today. And now I'm not going to share it.
Momentary relief. But then Jasmine goes,
you know what? I'm going to share it anyway. Zach, I love you. Zach, I love you. I love you. I love you. I kind of wanted to scream a little bit. Like, you know, it's like my heart is breaking for this person. But also, like, my heart is currently breaking from another breakup. This was clearly not the time to do that. I kind of pause and I end up saying, thank you for sharing. Because, like, what else can you...
What can you say? Yeah.
What can you say? And she's like, do you love me? And I'm like, I love you the way. And I listed some of my female friends who I do love, but these are just friends. And I'm like, I don't think that's what you're talking about. She goes, no. She goes, do you think you will ever love me? And it's like, I mean, no, I can't predict the future. You know what I mean? Like, of course not. But the answer was no. And, I didn't want to give her any hope. So I'm like, hey, I think if it hasn't happened by now, I don't think it's going to happen. We end up sitting. I just like, she would just be crying. And then once every minute, maybe ask me a question. And then we would just sit staring at each other crying for, I'm not joking, maybe 30 minutes. And finally, towards the end of it, I go, I'm really sorry. I feel like you kind of keep asking questions, hoping to get a different response. And my response is still the same. And so I actually thought that this was us breaking up. And afterwards, she's like, all right, well, let's go. We have a dinner reservation. Let's go. And I'm like, I don't think this is a good idea. And we ended up going out to dinner.
Wait, so you thought you broke up?
Well, I thought like this was, I thought she was going to leave. You know what I mean? Like, I just thought like this was kind of the end of it. She's like, let's get dinner. And I was like, hey, I think we should have some maybe time apart, like kind of starting the breakup process. She's like, no, we've done reservations. Let's go. And we ended up going out to dinner. It was an Italian restaurant less than a mile from my place.
So they walked there and ate dinner. It was a little awkward, and they didn't part ways after, like Zachary was expecting.
And then I was like, hey, you should go home. She kind of followed me back. And I was like, you really should leave.
Instead, they ended up hooking up.
I'm like, I don't want to do this. This is awkward. And we still did.
Again, confusing times. After they had sex, she stayed the night. And Zachary tried again to set a boundary. This one stuck.
Kind of the next morning, I'm like, okay, we need to take a break.
Soon after the breakup, having had that little time apart, it officially ended. Looking back, that last hookup felt to Zachary like their kind of farewell romp, or at least it turned out to be.
I think that was kind of like almost our goodbye sex was that time, but it was just like sad. I felt sad for her. I felt sad for me.
I feel like breakup sex, or whatever you want to call it, has this kind of hot, steamy, sexy vibe, but that experience was pretty uncomfortable on top of other cringiness. What do you do when someone says, I love you, and you care about them, but also you don't quite feel the same way? Zachary said he's not sure if the sex was the best move, if they should have even gotten that far after she professed her love.
When someone's crying and saying they love you, to be like, you have to leave now. It seems so brutal, but I think maybe I should. There was nothing good to do. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I did my best. And in the moment, I was just proud of myself for not saying I love you back. Part of me did love her. I know not in the way that she intended. Of course, I loved her. I care about this person. We were 9 or 10 months. Like, I wouldn't be spending time with you if I didn't care for you. But I was just honestly proud of myself for not saying something I didn't mean. Because I know me, old Zach, 7, 8 years ago, would have just said, I love you, and then wanted to ghost. Just to be like, I just want to avoid this.
Caring so much about Jasmine also made the sex uncomfortable because he felt like she had different motivations, at first at least.
I think she was hoping, like, kind of the sex would reel me back in a way. Like, I kind of got that vibe a little bit. I was like, no.
What made you think that? Like, what was the sex like?
Well, it's just the way where I'm like, hey, I think this is a bad idea. And just kind of the way she was pushing for it in a way. One of the things the sex life was great. You know what I mean? That wasn't something that we struggled with. Versus in other relationships, I struggle more with us connecting, but then we connect on this different level. I think it was maybe twofold. I think maybe hopefully I could convince him through this, and then hopefully just like, hey, I still want this. And I just remember like the joy, but also like the sadness. Like, there was a kind of both in it. It was bizarre. Yeah, I think it was kind of like goodbye sex. I think we both kind of knew this is the last time, and this is what it's going to be, and yeah, it was just kind of sad. Maybe it gave us both closure, and I held her after and we did this, and it was kind of like, there was a little bit of closure to it. I've never really had breakup sex before. That just my headspace doesn't go there.
It seemed to work out okay, though. Not without awkwardness, but they both did move on separately. And Zachary made a plan to avoid similar happenings in the future.
I made a rule after Jasmine where I was like, hey, the next person you date seriously, there needs to be like long-term potential. And if not, you're not going to like casually kind of date anymore. Because I felt like I was getting kind of in trouble with this casual dating. And I was tired of having these maybe 3 month to year-long relationships that often we end up breaking up for the reason I thought we were going to break up within the first 3 weeks. Whether it's that we don't connect on this level, or they're too judgmental of this, or we have different values, or whatever it is, and being like, hey, Zach, you can trust yourself. I'm someone with anxiety and OCD, so I overthink everything to the point that it becomes a pile of mush. But it's like, hey, if you're concerned about this being an issue down the line, it has been, and that's why you're breaking up. And I think in my 20s, I was like, just say yes. Why not? Let's see what happens. You can't predict the future. And then I think my 30s have been more about saying no. Hey, you have a sense of what you like. You know what you like. You don't need to keep saying yes to things that you think you won't. But so, yeah, I made a rule. The next person I call my boyfriend, girlfriend, they friend, whatever it is, there has to be long-term potential.
Then he met a woman we'll call Hannah.
So I met Hannah at House of Yes.
It's this nightclub in New York that's famous for these wild theme parties with like circus performers, burlesque dancers. It's super LGBTQ friendly, and it upholds this pro-consent policy enforced by, get this, consenticorns.
It's this big place, and we hit it off incredibly. She was brilliant. She was helping me, learning to set boundaries and communicating, and kind of was just someone who was really helping me, I feel like, grow as a person. Very smart and, non-monogamous, but definitely more of the like monogamous side of non-monogamy. She wanted 3 kids. She wanted to move upstate. I'm like, yeah, like I don't want kids at all. That is like a hard no for me. But we kind of kept going along. And then there was a time where she like wanted to like test run being monogamous for 9 months. Makes it sound like pregnancy. And it was not that. It was just like to get through a summer.
Zachary brought that up in therapy.
I'm talking to my therapist. My therapist is like, you've made it very clear you're non-monogamous. This person's trying to change you. They're hoping that after 9 months, you'll want to be more of the monogamous side and see what the thing is to offer.
At the time, Zachary's book was about to come out. It's called Boy Slut, a memoir and manifesto. In it, he talks about his very exploratory sex life.
So I'm talking about sleeping with 2,000 plus people. I'm a horny person, and it's that she's trying to take that away from you.
Was his therapist right? Was she trying to take his slutty exploration away from him? They hadn't even been together long.
It had only been 2-3 months, but again, it was one of those serious 2-3 months where like a very serious relationship. And I told her, like, hey, I think we're on like different pages. You want 3 kids, I do not. And I don't want to be the quirky stepdad, you know what I mean? Or the quirky uncle who's a part of this. She's like, we'll figure this out. I go, we're gonna be the only people in the world who's ever figured this out. I feel like this is the deal breaker. And the thing was, whenever I spoke to her, she would never say the word but. I'd say something and she'd be like, oh, totally understand where you're coming from. And then kind of negate what I said. And then I wouldn't realize it till after she left, because I'd think like, oh, this conversation went well. And then I was like, did it? Wait, I don't know if it actually did go well. I think she was just agreeing and nodding, but then saying the opposite of what I said. And I left feeling kind of confused. And we ended up breaking up.
They discuss these things a lot through email, which is what Zachary used to end the relationship.
And usually I would not break up via email, but she asked me for the 9-month thing. I responded to that. I also was afraid of seeing her in person because whenever I somehow get talked out of things. I feel like we would have ended up giving it a chance when I really didn't want to.
He was also on an important deadline for his book. So he sent the breakup email, and her response was so much worse than he could have imagined.
And she spent a week and maybe wrote this like 2,000-word email, like eviscerating me. Kind of all the things I told her in confidence about, the things I struggle with intimacy, the things I struggle with suppressing my anger, my relationship with my dad, all these things I've been open about, she kind of threw back in my face.
It was Christmas time, and Zachary was away visiting a friend in Florida, feeling anything but festive.
Like I was losing it. I felt terrible for the whole week.
Then he went home and to therapy, the email in hand.
When I showed it to my therapist, she was like, yeah, Zach, you got chewed up and spit out here. She's like, yeah, this is brutal. This is particularly brutal. She really read you for the stuff. And Zach, for what it's worth, you're working on these things.
Oh.
She painted the most extreme side of you, and that's not who you are anymore. And you are working on these things, and you'll continue. And you've already improved so much with me.
2 weeks later, he ran into Hannah at a festival.
Like, when we do the appropriate hi, she was like, hey, Zach, I'd actually love to kind of talk and catch up. And I said, I'm going to be real with you. I don't want to do that. I was extremely hurt by what you said, and I felt it was a little bit uncalled for. I'm sorry you were hurt, but this was brutal. And she was like, hey, I know it was, and that was on purpose. I wanted you to get my message. And we ended up talking for about 4 or 5 minutes. We both ended up crying.
Did she apologize?
Kind of. She wanted to get her point through to me. And she was like, and that's why it's important for me to do this. And she was like, I'm sorry I hurt you, but she wasn't sorry she did it. I was like, okay, your point was made. Kind of like after 4 minutes, we both cried. And I was like, you know what? Like, okay, we're fine. We're on good terms now. We can run into each other. But obviously, no, I'm way too hurt and heartbroken to have her in my life and as friends or anything.
Oh, that's so hard. I'm so glad you had a good therapist already. Can you imagine if you didn't?
Do you know what the irony was? She recommended that therapist.
No.
Yeah, she had gone to that therapist once, realized it wasn't a good fit, but then it was a form of somatic therapy that I actually loved her. And she's like, I think you would do it. And my therapist didn't even remember who she was. She's like, oh, she must have seen me a while ago, realized I wasn't her cup of tea, but she thought I was.
Another thing helped Zachary cope too.
What's the famous phrase? I think it was Christopher Isherwood. He has this quote in one of his books: lovers are like a bus. You get off one and then you can get on the next one. For me, when I have a breakup, I go into slut mode, and that actually works for me.
He uses an app for that.
God bless Grindr. Grindr is what helps me get over my breakups. There's something about just getting back out there, still feeling validated, still feeling wanted, still feeling desired. And even though might just be casual hookups I'm having on Grindr after a breakup, it still lets me know I can find love and people will want to date me and find me attractive and likable. Sex is kind of this little form of validation in that interim. And after a few months of doing that, we're like, okay, I got this out of my system. I know this. Am I ready to date more seriously? Then I hop back on Grindr to okay, now I'm trying to date.
While a slut phase helps Zachary get over breakups, he said that is not the ideal move for everyone.
I have friends this works for them and other friends where I'm like, hey, I know you're doing what I'm doing. It doesn't seem like it's coming from the same place. And it's such a seemingly a hypocritical thing to say. I'm like, you know me, I'm the biggest, sex positive horn dog there can be. But I just want to make sure, is this coming from a good place?
I think that's so good that you can see that, because different things work for different people. And I'm sure people look at you, especially friends of yours who are not sex experts. They look at you and they might want to emulate, because they're like, you're the expert and you've written this book, so I'm going to be a slut too. And you're like, well, maybe great, but also maybe not great.
Exactly. If you were a slut before you dated this person, I want to go back to it. Okay, that's one thing. If this really isn't who you seem to be, I would not give you the same advice I'd give myself or someone else.
Currently, Zachary is not in his slut mode.
I'm now in relationship mode.
He's been with his partner for a year and a half.
And this is kind of the longest relationship I've had since my boyfriend of 2 years that I was talking about. We met through a friend. She's actually a professional dominatrix, but used to work in the literary world, which is kind of exactly what I need as someone who is an author and writer. She actually edits my works, but then meets me on that educational, informational, literary level, and then also on that sex positive level. We are now open as opposed to poly. We're not opposed to being poly, but we still want to kind of build this stronger connection. Both of us find ourselves getting a little bit jealous with other partners in a way that usually we don't. How do we navigate this? How do we be honest about this? Neither of us are dating other people.
All of that feels really right to him.
We both met at a perfect time in our lives. I think if we had met 7 months earlier, I was still in that place of dating everyone and not settling down and not knowing why I'm in these situations. And she was also coming off of heartbreak and, also in a slut phase too. It just happened to be I met her at a point where I'm I just kind of gotten my heart broken a couple of times. I can't fucking do this again. I need to slow down with the next person I date and not jump into things because I get excited. And we took it really slow. And I don't mean sexually. When we first met, we had a foursome. That was how we met through friends. But in terms of actually just think we hooked up maybe 3 or 4 times, and then we went on our first dates. And then we wouldn't like text every day. We would text mainly to make plans to hang out and then do that. And then after maybe like 4 or 5 months, we're like, oh, I think I love you. And then we were kind of been in it since.
As for Zachary's top breakup advice, he shared this.
People might disagree with me on this, but this is my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt or not. There often is no good time to do a breakup. I have gotten in trouble where I wanted to break up with someone in person. They're like, well, now I'm embarrassed and crying in public. Why didn't you just do this via text? I've gotten in trouble for doing it in person. I've gotten in trouble for trying to preemptively gauge their emotions via text. I've heard people get pissed off because, they wanted to wait till after Valentine's Day, and then they do it after Valentine's Day and they realize that Valentine's Day was completely fake and they feel like shit. Or the person does it before Valentine's Day and they're like, why would you do this before Valentine's Day? Like, if it's going to be a bad breakup, there's nothing you can do. And you just got to rip the Band-Aid off. It's just going to freaking suck. They're going to be upset. There's nothing you can do to not make them upset. And they're allowed to be upset. They should be upset. Their heart's broken. Or if you were an asshole and you led them on, you were an asshole and led them on. Like, those feelings are valid. But also, if you felt like you're in the right and you didn't do anything wrong, let them feel their emotions without it causing too much guilt and pain for you.
Learn more from today's storytellers in their respective books. As you may recall from a past episode that Suzannah appeared in, her book is called Subjectified: Becoming a Sexual Subject.
It's a book about sexual empowerment from my own perspective, about the experiences I've had as a sex and relationship writer and how they've informed my view of sex-positive feminism.
She has another book coming out in September in the US and July in the UK. It's called Eve's Blessing: Uncovering the Lost Pleasure Behind Female Pain. As I mentioned, Zachary's book is called Boy Slut: A Memoir and Manifesto.
It's about how to overcome sexual shame. And I write through, obviously, a bisexual lens, kink positive lens, polyamory lens, all that stuff, the stuff that I am. I also have a Substack also called Boy Slut. And that has over like 10,000 subscribers. People love it. It's nonfiction and fiction erotica, but it's very like literary nonfiction.
Find both books on Amazon or from your favorite bookseller. Find links in the show notes. If you enjoyed this Girl Boner radio episode, or you've been listening along for a while, I would so appreciate a rating on Spotify or the Apple Podcast app on iPhones. On Apple, you can also post a short review. Thank you so much for listening.